Hi, this week we're going to be discussing chapters 23 and 24 in our business law book. Chapter 23 is about the rules governing the issuance and trading of securities. The Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as the SEC, is the federal agency that's responsible for overseeing the securities market and enforcing federal securities legislation. The Securities Act of 1933 regulates generally the issuance of securities. The Securities Act of 1934 the SEC regulates trading securities. The Securities and Exchange Commission was created under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. The purpose of this SEC was to ensure that investors receive full and fair disclosure of all material facts with regard to any public offering of securities. In 2010, Congress passed a bill that brought a massive overhaul of federal government financial regulations and seemed to affect every sector of the economy. The piece of legislation became known as the Dodd-Frank bill, named after its major sponsors, Senator Dodd, who was a chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and Congressman Frank, who was chairman of the House of Financial Affairs Committee. Following the Martha Stewart Living Incorporated, Tyco International Incorporated, Enron Corporation, and other cases, Congress passed a bipartisan measure in 2002 sponsored by Senator Paul Sarbanes and Representative Michael Oxley, and was signed into law by President Bush. The act requires a new approach to corporate governance. Chief executive officers and chief financial officers must now certify that statements and reports are accurate. Securities are a stock, a bond, or any other instrument of interest that represents an investment in a common enterprise with reasonable expectations of profits that are derived solely from the efforts of those other than the investor. Prospectus is the first part of the registration statement the SEC requires from issuers of the new securities. It contains material information about the business and its management, the offering itself, the use to be made of the funds obtained, and certain financial statements. Underwriters are investment banking firms that agrees to purchase a securities issue from the issuer, usually on a fixed date at a fixed price, with a view to eventually selling securities to brokers who in turn will sell them to the public. A red herring is a preliminary prospectus that contains most of the information that will appear in the final prospectus except for the price of the securities. The red herring prospectus may be distributed to potential buyers during the waiting period, but no sales may be finalized during this period. A letter of comment or deficiency is an informal letter issued by the SEC indicating what corrections must be made in a registration statement for it to become effective. Brokers and dealers are required to register with the SEC under the Exchange Act unless exempted. A dealer is a person engaged in the business of buying and selling securities for his or her own account. A broker, this is a person, that is engaged in the business of buying and selling securities for others' accounts. The exchange market is a securities market that provides a physical facility for the buying and selling of stock and prescribes the number and qualification of its broker members. These brokers buy and sell stocks through the exchange registered specialists who are dealers on the floor of the exchange. The over-the-counter market is a securities market that has no physical facility and no membership qualifications, and whose broker-dealers are market makers who buy and sell stocks directly from the public. A tender offer is a public offer by an individual or corporation made directly to the shareholders of another corporation in an effort to acquire the targeted corporation at that specific price. A hostile bid is a tender offer that is opposed by the management of the target company. Insider trading is the use of material, non-public information received from a corporate source by someone who has a fiduciary obligation to shareholders and potential investors and who benefits from trading on such information. Scienter is knowledge that a representation is false. A short swing profits are profits made by directors officers or owners of 10% or more of the securities of a corporation as a result of buying and selling the securities within a six-month period. That was Chapter 23. So Chapter 24, this chapter is about antitrust laws. Trusts were originally business arrangements in which owners of stocks in several companies placed their securities with trustees who jointly manage the companies and pay out a specific share of their earnings to the securities holders. The Chicago School is an approach to antitrust policy that is based solely on the goal, economic efficiency, or the maximization of consumer welfare. The Harvard School is an approach to antitrust policy that is based on the desirability of preserving competition to prevent the accumulation of economic and political power, the dislocation of labor, and also the market inefficiency. A class action suit is a lawsuit that's brought on by a member of a group of persons on behalf of all members of the group. A parents' patriot suit is a lawsuit brought by a state attorney general on behalf of the citizens of that state. The Sherman Act is a federal statute that makes illegal every combination, contract, or conspiracy that is an unreasonable restraint of trade when this concerted action involves interstate commerce. A collusion is a concerted action by two or more individuals or business entities in violation of the Sherman Act. A horizontal boycott is a concerted refusal by a trade association to deal with members that do not follow the association's regulations. Vertical restraint of trade is a restraint that occurs between individuals or corporations at different levels of the marketing structure. Vertical price fixing is agreements of this type have traditionally been judged per se illegal by the courts if a contract, combination, or conspiracy exists under Section 1 of the Sherman Act. It's stipulation by a manufacturer to retailer to which it sells products as to what price the retailer must charge for those products. A non-vertical restraint is a restraint used by a manufacturer to limit the territory in which the retailer may sell the manufacturer's products and the number of stores that the retailer can operate, as well as the customers the retailer can serve in that location. And lastly, we have monopoly. And this is an economic market situation in which a single business has the power to fix the price of goods or services. So that is our summary of chapters 23 and 24 this week in our business law book. I will see you next week. Thank you.